All right. So good morning to everyone. We are recording now. So okay, apologies we haven't met in a while, but good to be able to be back and learning. We are going to continue with Reish Ayin Gimel, starting a new siman this morning, and it's the last siman that discusses the laws of Kiddush with great depth. We've talked about the kinds of wine that we can use. We've talked about um, if there is no wine, what do we do in a situation of no wine? We've talked about how much needs to be in the cup. We've talked about all sorts of things that relate to Kiddush. And the one last big header here is Kiddush. HaKiddush bimkom seuda, that the Kiddush should be in the place where the meal, where the meal happens. So we're going to discuss this. This is there's a machlokas whether this is a halacha that's a d'oraisa or a d'rabanan. The Rush holds that Kiddush bimkom seuda, that making Kiddush in the place where you then will engage in the meal, is the requirement on a biblical level, such that if you you made the Kiddush in one spot, and then you ate in a completely different spot. And we'll talk about how do we define what are two different spots. That's going to be a big discussion here. Then you would need to go back in the second spot and make the Kiddush if you didn't engage in any meal here. So I'll just throw out right off the bat something that we all need to think about here, because of the custom that is in this shul. The custom is that, and those of you who are here much longer than I will tell me how long this custom goes back. But the custom is that Kiddush is made here in the shul at the conclusion of davening in the main shul. And then the food is set up in this room where we are right now in the social hall. So I'm just putting it out there that we're going to think about that, because we're not in the same room. And that's going to be there's some considerations here to think about in that context. When it's not in the same room, yeah, we're in the same building. So we'll have to, so I'm just giving you as an example of where you made Kiddush in one spot and you didn't engage in any eating until you moved to another spot. So we're going to dive into this topic with great depth, all sorts of calculations that need to be made. All these discussions stem from the Gemara in Arvei Psachim, towards the beginning of that perek. I have some, because I've taught that with the middle schoolers for many years, and even back to when I was a Ramaz in the high school. So it's one of the rare sugyas in Shas where I've learned it a few times, so I'll be able to hopefully draw from some of the sources that we learned in class. Okay.
Is there any distinction between night and day Kiddush in regard to this?
No, there is no distinction. Yes, this is relevant for the night Kiddush and the day Kiddush. Now, it's fine to say Kiddush Makom Suda is a d'oraisa according to the Rush, for Kiddush on Shabbos morning, which is only the Rabbanan, but the principle would carry over. So I guess the higher stakes are at night, but it's a principle we apply also in the morning. By the way, most poskim seem to hold that it's the Rabbanan, and we'll see why actually off the bat here in a moment, because of the source of this halacha comes from Navi, not from the Torah. Okay, let's take a look now at what the Shulchan Aruch has to say as we jump into this topic. He starts off with the general statement of the rule: Ein Kiddush ela bimkom seuda. And I'll note as a side point here that the pronunciation, if you're in the yeshiva world, is not Ein Kiddush ela bimkom seuda, even though that's the correct nikud. It's that everyone will always pronounce it as Ein Kiddush ela b'makom seuda. So bimkom, b'makom, okay. However we say it is fine. Okay. Look at the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Katan Aleph. Before we even jump into some of the details, he gives you the more generic statement in the background here. This is from the Rashbam. Good morning, Simeon. See you this there. We're just starting Reish Ayin Gimel, Simeon, just to make sure you're in the right spot. All right, and you're muted in case you wanted to be able to jump in at any point with a question. Just know that you are on mute right now. Okay. So this comes from the. Hi, Simeon. So Reish Ayin Gimel, and we're up to. We just read the first 5 words of Sif Gimel of the Siman, and we're up to Sif Katan Aleph right now in the Mishnah Berurah. So Bimkom Seuda. So he writes here, Dichtiv V'karata la Shabbos oneg. Bimkom oneg shehu has-seuda. Sham tehei akriya shel kiddush. So it says in the pasuk in Yeshayahu, Nun Ches, if I'm not mistaken, that you shall call the Shabbos a delight. So here the Rashbam and then Tosfos, which is not surprising because Rashbam is one of the Balei Tosfos, quotes this on the page there in Arvei Psachim, that in the place of Oneg, in the place of delight, which is referring to this seuda. That's where we delight. We enjoy our delicious food. We relax. We have a good time, right? In the place where we have our oneg, which is the seuda, sham there should be the kriya shel kiddush shall be the calling of the sanctity, or the reading of the sanctity of the day. So, and that's done by the recitation of kiddush. So the kiddush should be the karasa la Shabbos oneg. So I called the Shabbos. How did I call the Shabbos? That's by making kiddush. I called the Shabbos an oneg. So in the place where there's an oneg, that's where I call the Shabbos. It's what you would call an asmachta. Okay, that's probably the most easy way to understand it. An asmachta is that it's a hint towards. In fact, actually, in my edition of the Mishnah Berurah, on the comments that it has here, it says v'limud ze'enu ela asmachta derabbanan. That this is a rabbinic way to remember it. That you should make the kiddush where the oneg is. Okay.
As opposed to Yom Tov, which was Simcha.
Right. By the way, correct. By Yom Tov, you wouldn't have technically such a concept, right? I never thought about that because this pasuk is referring specifically to Shabbos. It's the 58th chapter of Yeshayahu, and it's talking about Shabbos, not Yom Tov. Though I think we hold of the concept of kiddush b'makom seuda on Yom Tov too. I don't think we differentiate, but. In my extra comments over here, he quotes from the Be'er Halacha that's coming up soon that Shekiddush. They don't have this in front of you, and Tommy, who's in Israel, and will be catching the recording later. I guess maybe he has an addition with him, but it's Shekiddush b'makom seuda who rak midrabanan. The Be'er Halacha said the Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim says that the concept of Kiddush b'makom seuda is just a rabbinic concept, and that's why we're using a pasuk from Navi, and it's a cute way to remember it. But the Be'er Halacha does quote the Rush that who holds Shekiddush b'makom seuda hu midoraisa. So just be aware that there's not an insignificant rabbinic figure who holds that this concept is biblical in nature, and that therefore you have to have the pasuk is just a clever way to help you remember a halacha that is actually derived from the Torah. We would have to look for a little bit more of a sourcing on that one. In terms of where the Rush gets that concept. Okay, so that is the underpinnings of Kiddush b'makom seuda in terms of its source. Now let's go back up to the Shulchan Aruch and read the second sentence. Uvevayis echad mipina lefina chashuv makom echad shim kiddush leachol bepina zo v'nimlach leachol bepina acheres filuhu tiraklin gadol. So if we're in one house, one building, let's make it very simple. And we're going from corner to corner. Pina is a corner, right? Maybe you recall from the song about Haman's hat. Lakova Sheli, Shalosh, okay, whatever. So Pina is the corner, okay? And that's Choshuv Mokom Echad is considered one space. When we talk about Kiddush b'makom seuda, if I make Kiddush in this corner of the social hall, and let's assume that these sliding the wall wasn't here, and there's a big room, and I decide my table is going to be all the way on the other corner, not a problem at all. That's what it even says here, that if you make Kiddush, by the way, Shim Kiddush le'echol b'pina zo, I make Kiddush over here in this corner, and I'm thinking I'm going to sit at this table over here, the one they set up over here. Turns out I made the Kiddush. And people say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't tell you. I already reserved this table for my, my aunt and uncle, and this one now." Oh, okay, no worries. Even though I made kiddush over here, thinking I'm going to eat over here, and it turns out, v'nimlach, I'm going to eat in the other corner of the room. right? Afilu tiraklin gadol. It's a big hall, right? So it's a huge space. Think about some of these wedding halls, right? You could imagine I make kiddush on one side of the room, and end up eating all the way on the other side of the room. But it's one room. It could be a huge space. No worries. Eino tzarich lachazor ulekadesh. You don't need to return back. Sorry, you don't need to go back and make a new kiddush in the new spot where you're going to eat. Same room as so far. There may be multiple opinions on this one, but so far we're seeing that this is that right now you need to be in the same room where you made the kiddush and you eat. Even if you thought you were going to eat in this corner, it's fine. You can eat in the other corner. You don't have to make kiddush again.
Right.
Founded by wolf. Okay. Well, but you had in mind, maybe you might have thought the Havamina is, so just for Simeon and everyone else who's going to watch on the recorder later, listen on the tape. I dated myself there. Going to listen online later. You may have thought that the Havamina is that since I was like, no, I'm eating here, right? Al shulchan's there. I'm going to eat over here. And then it turns out, whatever, I have to eat over on the other side of the room. You might have thought, no, because I had in mind that spot that my kiddush doesn't extend anywhere else. That I was eating over here. So the kamash malan that as long as it's the same room, it may seem obvious that you could have had that havamina that I should stay in the spot where I actually was, in the Daled Amos where I made that kiddush. Right? It's at least a havamina, a forethought. At the end of the day, that's not what we say. You're absolutely right. Yeah, Jeffrey, and then Simeon I know has the question. So Jeffrey, go ahead.
I would think because it says bias echad mipina lepina, like it's sort of obvious that it is within one room, and in fact, if it only meant one room, I don't know why it would say in one house. Maybe it should say cheder echad mipina lepina. I think because it says bias, I thought it meant from like corner of one house to the corner of another, like because otherwise there is no chiddush in the word bias. I don't.
So I'll tell you why I read it like that. It's funny that you. I don't know, Stevie. I don't know if you can hear the question. Jeffrey was asking. Wait, it says bias. It doesn't say cheder. It says from house. From one corner of the house to the other, and not one corner of the room to the other. The reason I explained like that was because this was where my previous knowledge came in handy. So if you look at the Gemara, I'm actually going to pull it up here. I'm going to pull the Gemara up because I don't want to do a disservice here. Okay. And this may also, the reason that term may have been used is because their houses are not like our houses, and they were essentially one big room. And so as I'm pulling this Gemara up here, it's Daf Kuf. I really am not holding usually in Gemaras like this. I don't need to know. Oh, it's on this page and this line and whatever. I've taught this at least 5-6 times right now. Okay, it's Daf Kuf Aleph. Okay. So here the Gemara says, the Gemara introduces this concept of Kiddush b'makom suda because it comes up in the Gemara in the context of the discussion of making Kiddush in shul. Why? How can you make Kiddush in shul if you're going to eat at home? Kiddush b'makom suda. So the Gemara answers, well, because there are people who used to stay in the shul, and for them, this was their place of where they would eat the meal. So for them, the Kiddush most certainly would count. And then the Gemara says, Amar lahu, the Amar Shmuel en Kiddush el b'makom suda svur mina. The students of Shmuel thought from this, Hani mili mi bayis lebayis, that this would mean from house to house. That if you make, right? When does it not count? If I go from one house to another house, but from one spot to another spot in the very same house, the Gemara says no, there is no problem. Now, but then the Gemara says the following. So I'll give you some background here. It's not a bad thing. Amar lahu Rav Anan bar Tachlifa. He responds back to the students of Shmuel, who I guess never in Shmuel's lifetime got to ask him, so they assumed about him that when he said this concept, it was like Okay, the only time it's a problem is if I make Kiddush in this building and I go to the next building, that's when it's a problem to carry the Kiddush over. But Rav Bar Khalifa says, no, Zimin Sagin have a kamei to Shmuel. I got invited to Shmuel's house on Shabbos. He invited me for Shabbos, for a Shabbos meal. And one time I was at his house, and one time we were on the roof. Right? They didn't. There was two. There was the main floor, and then you had the roof. That's where they dried the fruits, and they were on the roof. And he made kiddush. And I don't know if it started raining or whatever. And for some reason, they came back down before they ate their meal. Because once you start eating, then kiddush was welcome. So then you could switch spaces. Okay. And that's a question about benching. Where do I bench? But because we made kiddush, and then we came down from the roof to the la'ara, to the ground floor, to the main part of the house. The Hadar Mekadesh. He says I was in his house and he made kiddush again. So he was on the roof of the house and he came in and he made kiddush again. So there is a machlokas that exists between Rav Anan Bar Tachlifa and the other students of Shmuel, and he, in some ways, has the best view of this because he was in Shmuel's house and witnessed this. So. And then there's another story that Rav Afra and that Rav Huna also held of this concept, because why? Rav Huna made kiddush. Now this doesn't actually help in this machlokas, because Rav Huna made kiddush on Friday night. Then his lights blew out, his candles blew out, and it was dark. And so he and his family took their food and they went to his son-in-law's house to go eat Shabbos Suda. And when he got there, he made kiddush.
Again?
Yeah, he made kiddush again because he didn't eat anything. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. You're good. Okay. Yeah. And so, anyways, he made another kiddush and he ate some other food there. And then there's a third story which is about Rabbah in the Gemara, that he used to have the boys over in the yeshiva would come. He said when he was in Rabbah's house, because he was kind of adopted by Rabbah, and he says every Friday night we would be by the Rebbe, we daven I guess at his house, and he would make kiddush. And before we all went to sort of wherever we were staying. He would tell us, take something to eat before you go back. So he would make kiddush, and he would tell the boys, eat something. Why? And they all looked at him, what? We're going to go home. And he said, no, you never know. You might get home, the lights might be out, right? In the middle of your meal, you're making kiddush, and the lights will go out. So I made kiddush, eat something. Therefore, you'll have kiddush b'mkom seuda, and you'll fulfill the obligation, and then whatever, you'll go eat the rest. You'll do your thing at home. But so these are the stories there are three stories that the Gemara shares about Kiddush B'mkom Seuda. So I just wanted to share that. Look, it's very possible now that, Steve, do you have in your edition, how do they translate the word Troklin? Do they have the translation there? It's like palace. Now that, yeah, I love that you challenged me, Jeffrey, on this one, because you're making me think right now. I was swayed by Rav Anan Bar Tachlifa because he thinks that from one part of the house to the other you can't. But maybe I'm looking up in Jastro.
What is the word?
Teraklin, that word in the second line there with a tet. Yeah, I'm looking it up in the Jastro. I thought it means like a giant hall.
I think the shoresh in there is ragil.
In Teraklin, the word Teraklin Gadol.
Oh, with a kuf?
Yeah. Petre kuf lamed here. Hold on.
Oh, there it is. I got it.
You got it? What do you say, Shlomo?
No. Tarkolim.
It's indoors, you said?
They call it a lounge here.
You found it where?
I just Googled it.
Oh, you Googled it. There you go. You can do anything these days. Right.
Is the word rachok ending with a kuf or a kaf?
It's a Greek word.
It's definitely not a Hebrew word here. Hold on, my gesture is working.
Yeah, I had to.
Rock, track.
I say chocolate English.
Track. Okay, hold on. Oh, here, Tarkilarin. That's not the same word. We need to get the ratio out of there. Traklin.
Dictionary.
Borrowed
from ancient Greek.
What is it? What did you get?
Oh, same.
That it's a lounge.
It's a salon, parlor, lounge.
Okay, so look, I'm actually willing to be open-minded here. That maybe Jeffrey, actually, you're right. That this is from one. From one spot to the other in a house. I was swayed by, again, Rabbanan Bar Tachlifa. That's where my head was, because that's how I've always learned the sugya. Yeah. So let's use the words literally here. Yeah. Bayis echad mipina lepina chashuv makom echad shim kiddush v'le'achol b'pina zov v'nim lach le'achol b'pina acheres. I feel who tiraklin gadol. I guess it's a big. Like I was imagining a big hall, but you're saying it's even just like a lounge. It's like almost like what did you have? What was the parlor somewhere? That's a big. It's a big building, like not like just like a regular house. Houses were very small, in the Bisman Mishnah, the Gemara.
Rav,
Yes, Simi, go ahead with your question. Yeah.
Rav, there's a lack of specificity. Which kiddush are we talking about? Are we talking about the midoraisa on Friday night? Or are we talking about midorabbanon on Shabbos? And if we're talking about the midorabbanon on Shabbos, then how could anybody make kiddush in shul, the famous kiddush club and whatever, and then have to go home for the meal?
So there are two different pieces here. One is that there's kiddush has to be malcham seuda. Now the seuda is not defined the way that we might define it in our minds, and we're going to see that. The Shulchan Aruch is going to talk about what is considered seuda. Is seuda I have to have a full meal, or is it that I have to get mizonos? I can have some crackers, some cholent, assuming it has barley in it. Right? And that's enough. And even though I still have to have a separate chiyuv of having a meal with lechem mishneh, I might still be able to make the kiddush and enjoy something that is defined as seuda, even though I still have a separate mitzvah of having a seuda with lechem mishneh. Those could be viewed as two distinctly separate things, and they are, giving it away. So we're going to get to later on in this siman defining what is a seuda halachically, right? Colloquially, you might say that a seuda is a big meal. We talk about the mitzvah of a seuda on Purim, and we envision a large festive meal. But seuda, in terms of the definition halachically, does not have as high a threshold. Okay, again, if you have mizonos at your kiddush, so there's cake, cookies. Again, cholent with the barley, then you're good. You can make kiddush and eat some of that. That's why people insist on I take a cracker, I take something at kiddush, because that fulfills the mitzvah of kiddush b'mkom seuda. You still have a separate issue of having a full meal with lechem mishneh. To the point where, by the way, you wouldn't need to make kiddush. If that's say you heard kiddush in shul, and everybody in your family heard kiddush in shul, and everybody ate things that are defined that make it a seuda halachically, and then you go home and you want to have your full meal with the challah and everything, you don't need to make kiddush first. You could go right to washing hands and hamotzi.
That's the argument against the prohibition of the woman not making the kiddush. The woman has a greater obligation to make kiddush at the home relating to the seuda.
If she didn't hear something.
If she wasn't in shul.
Right.
I think I have difficulty where we are now. It seems to me that we have minimized the chashivut, certainly of the Friday night meal. And I always thought of the meal as not only the Kiddush, but following the washing, the motzi, and of course at the end, Birkat HaMazon, without which you don't have that chashivut, certainly for Friday night. And we haven't defined which Kiddush we're talking about.
So this rule applies to both kiddushes, night and day. That the idea of kiddush bimkom seuda applies both at night and during the day. Yes, we won't make any distinctions on that. It apply if there's a mitzvah of kiddush, whether it's the Friday night kiddush, which is the oraisa, or the day kiddush, which is the rabbanon. We have that obligation to do kiddush bimkom seuda. Okay, all right.
Okay.
All right. Let's keep going up in the Shulchan Aruch. Actually, we're going to see a quick comment of the Ramah, and then we'll come back to Mishnah Berurah's comment. The Mishnah Berurah's comments. Let's go read through because there are a few different opinions here. So let's lay them on the table. On top of what we just read, that you don't need to go back and make a kiddush. The Ramah here adds umibayis la sukkah chashuv kimipina lepina. That if you go from your house to the sukkah, and vice versa, by the way, it could be from the sukkah to the house, which is probably the more realistic scenario, that you started the meal in the sukkah, it started raining, and you moved inside, and you can imagine you just made kiddush, and suddenly the skies open up, and you can't even get to the hamotzi because it takes 5 minutes for everyone to wash around the table. We're going inside. So according to this, it is considered like corner to corner. Now we're going to have a whole discussion. We'll read the Be'er Halacha too in just a moment about where is your sukkah located. Is your sukkah in your house? Then you just the roof was removed, so it's really like it is. These places are like literally attached to the house. Is it that you walk out of the door on your deck and you go walk right into the sukkah, so it's like attached to your house? Or what if it's in the yard and you have to leave and then you have to go out and then go into the sukkah? Do we treat all these situations like mipina lepina, or do we say no? If it's fully detached, that's a whole different ballgame. So we'll see. There's a range of opinions on that question, but on a simple level, right now we see the Ramah says it's chashuv like corner to corner. It's considered corner to corner. V'yesh omrim. Okay, so now we have another approach to this. V'yesh omrim. Okay, and this is quoted in the name of some of the Gaonim. Shekol sheroa mikomo afilu mibayis lachotzer. Okay, as long as you see the spots. So I made kiddush here, and I see where I'm eating, right? Or I can be where I'm eating, and I see where I made kiddush originally. That even if you go from a house to the courtyard, so you've left the house and you're in the courtyard right next to your house. You don't need to make another kiddush when you get to the second spot. Now you make kiddush in one, and you start, you do hamotzi in the other. Clearly, yes. This is, by the way, very relevant to the sukkah in the chatzer, right? This is very relevant to the case of the sukkah that's in the chatzer. Yeah. So as long as you can see from one to the other, that's going to be fine. But what does see mean? Do I actually have to see what part of the space do I have to see? So we'll get to that, right? That's the question here. V'yesh omrim, another opinion here. This is the Rabbeinu Nisim, quoted Rabbeinu Nisim. Okay, that's the Ran. Says in kiddush b'makom echad al das lechol b'makom acher. If I make kiddush in one spot with the intention, with my mindset that I'm going to eat in another spot. So shapir dame. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. Ba'ayin le'el resh simin kuf ayin ches, which are some of the laws of seuda earlier in Orach Chaim. Okay, maybe we'll take a look at that in a moment also. Okay, v'hu sheyesh shnei hamakomos b'vayis echad. Now, on understanding the Ran's opinion, right? He says it has to be two places within one house. Okay? Kegon mi cheder lecheder. from one room to another room, o mi igra le'ara, or from the roof to the main floor, right? V'chein ikar, and this is the essential opinion that we follow. This last one here. Now, given Jeffrey your question from before, my only question is, what's different about this Yesh Omrim opinion and the first opinion? Let's work it through. I'm I like when people challenge me. In terms of we sharpen each other's understanding here. The first opinion had said, Bayis echad it has to be Bayis echad from corner to corner. That's considered one place, right? That if you make in one corner a kiddush and then you do in the other, that's fine. The last opinion that we just saw here, this Yesh Omer with Ran, said that as long as you have in mind from one corner as long as you have in mind from one place to another, that's also fine. But he says caveat, right? Right? The two places have to be in one house. So is he saying, is the difference between, it sounds like it's the same opinion basically, that I go from one spot, from room to room, from roof to main floor, totally fine. So what's the differentiating factor? Is it simply that the first opinion holds that if you had in mind that I'm not sure what's the differentiation, you're hearing my point. Otherwise, I feel like the first opinion is exactly the same as the last opinion. So let's read the Mishnah Berurah. Let's get some more color on this one. I obviously the words lend itself to exactly what you read, but the last opinion would be the same. Would be this.
Isn't it?
The sukkah is considered. Depends how it is in relation to the house. If it's like you remove the roof kind of sukkah, but it's a part of your house essentially, then it's you'll see it's for sure. If it's in the yard, then it's detached. That's another thing, but there's still some lenient opinions about that question as well. Let's look here at the Mishnah Berurah. I think it's going to give us some more insight here. Okay, Sif Katan Beis Lechol the Pina Zo v'chule. The kol shekenim kiddush al das lechol apina acheres to shapir dami. And certainly, if I have in mind to make it, to make the kiddush, in one spot with the idea that I'll eat on in another corner, then that's fine. Which, by the way, may be the differentiating factor. Maybe the last opinion would hold that if you didn't have it in mind, then you're stuck in the spot where you made the kiddush within your house. Maybe that's the differentiation. But let's work it through. Okay. Fifth katan gimel. V'nimlach, and it turns out, because the word nimlach means you didn't have it in mind. Nimlach is like, and it turned out I happened to be somewhere else. So kiddush here happened to be somewhere else. So mikol makom, lichatchila tov shelo lasor mimakom shekidish. Really lichatchila, it's best not to start moving around from where you made kiddush. There is an opinion that even going from corner to corner, we don't like that. There's more machmir in that situation. There's some who are machmir about that situation. So we don't want to get involved with that. Unless I had it in mind that I was going to make kiddush in another spot, as mistaber de'ein lahachmir bazeh. If I had it in mind, then for sure you don't have to be machmir that I made kiddush over here. Sometimes, by the way, they here in this very room, even if you made kiddush here, like usually there's a bar and the kiddush is like right here in the middle, right? And then let's say I made kiddush standing over there, and but then we sat down, somewhere else. I don't know, but obviously that's one room. So, but you can imagine that if I have it in mind, it's totally not a problem.
One person read it. It's okay. As long as it's the same
Yes, that's true. That's correct. But he's saying that best if you can avoid that, better, because there are some opinions that are machmir. So if you have it in mind, everyone thinks that you're good to go. Okay? All right. Dalid, the pina acheres. Okay, that you go from one, you made a kiddush in one corner, you end up in another. Avalim nimlach lechol becheder acher. See, now this is what I think has colored my opinion also. And if it turns out that you go and you eat in another room, right? This is another house, another room. Afshu be'oso bayis tzarich lachazor ulekadesh keven shelo haya dato lazeh be'es shekidesh. Right? He makes it very clear here in terms of how he reads that first opinion, which leads me to believe again. And this is just me talking, and so I wouldn't take it for anything. I'm just talking now. I think that when you talk about a sort of a Talmudic house, right, times from the Talmud, it was a room. It wasn't a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, split level. It was not that. They lived in one room, and then maybe they talk about that in order for there to be privacy in one's bedroom. We talked about this actually at the end of Chelek Beis, right? There's a whole discussion about what if there is a mechitza between this part of the room and the other part of the room, right? Because in terms of even sometimes of whatever, of having privacy, from the children who are there. This is like a discussion about putting a mechitza up. That tells you something about the kinds of places that they were living. This is that's why it's, by the way, the word bias isn't the Gemara. It's actually the words of the Gemara. But when you then look at what Rav Anan Bar Tachlifa says in response to the students, he says, "Well, I went from the roof to the ground, and he made another kiddush." Well, wasn't that all part of his house? Unless the kiddush is like, oh, a roof is a different, avira. But it's hard to imagine that. So, and you see, by the way, here that at least I'm in good company that the Chafetz Chaim also read this as if you go into another room, it's a totally different story. Now, this brings back to the fore what we do here in the shul. If going from one room to another is not okay, but here's the key words were, or we didn't actually get to it yet. Or we did. Kevin shalohay adato lazeh be'es hakidesh. Since I didn't have it in mind when I made kiddush to go from one room to another room, it's a problem. So what does this mean? That if I have, it does sound like if I have kavana, if I have it in mind, like the last opinion, by the way, maybe the first opinion, I don't know if you can get away with that, but certainly according to the last opinion, which we seem to say is v'chein ikar, that if I have in mind to go from one room to the other, then that's okay. So if we make kiddush in the main shul, like we do every week, everybody knows where the food is. No one has any qualms about it. No one has any doubts where the food is. You ever see the rush out the door? Like we haven't eaten before. Oh, there's a big kiddush this week, and everybody's streaming down the hallway. But they know that there's no food set up in the shul. Right? Everyone, this is no shul, right? So we all have in mind that when we make the kiddush, we're going to be coming here to eat the food subsequently, and to try to do a lechatchila where we will do kiddush in here and quiet everybody down. Good luck, right? It's not happening. And will everybody make the kiddush on their own? So we want to be sure. How long has that minhag gone back here? I'm just very curious in this shul. Is this from your Rabbi Rubenstein did that? He would make kiddush in the main shul? Yeah. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
I will tell you, meaning I looked at number 5 here, so it says.
Oh, you have the same edition as me. Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't realize. Okay, good.
It says that the Rav Shlomo's on Arba.
And Rav Elyashiv.
Say even if you don't have it in mind because you do it.
Correct.
Week after week, if you switch rooms.
Very good.
It's okay.
That's in the middle of the meal, even, by the way.
We'll make kiddush in one room, and then we'll eat in another.
In the other, right?
And according to him,
right?
Both of them were
right.
incredible.
Correct.
It's fine, and you don't have to have it in mind because you do it all the time.
Correct. Correct. There's an assumption, right? It says it's all under one roof.
But I've actually heard people tell me, that if I make kiddush in the living room, I should make it again at the table. But according to this, I wouldn't have.
No. I don't think you should do that. I don't think you should do that because you have it in mind, right? By the way, also sometimes I've been to people's houses.
If you don't have it in mind, meaning just because.
But if it's a regular thing that you do. Yeah, and by the way, if you have guests, you can let them know we're gonna make kiddush and then we're gonna eat in the other room, but just have in mind that we're gonna be moving along at a point afterwards.
Rob,
Yes.
I wanted to
One second, Simeon, Steve just started a question, and then I'm going to call you. No, you're good. There's no way you would have heard him. Yes, Steve. What was that? What is kiddush?
Dr. Korach, Rabbi, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then we say kiddush.
You make bar per gafen, and then we say the kiddush bracha on Friday night. Yeah.
Shabbos morning.
We just say bar per gafen. Right.
So
it's the kiddush. It's the kiddush.
no, but it's not. It's
the kiddush rabbah. Right. So.
It's not kiddush.
Right, but it does have. We give that bar per gafen on Shabbos day. We give it the status of kiddush. We have a chiyuv to do it now. If we don't have the wine, as we talked about, so you just skip right to the. So it's better even to do what? To do schnapps, right? On Friday night, just better to use the challah and make the kiddush. So that extra bracha, it has some chashivas. Now, is it the same at all? No, that's why they euphemistically named it Kiddusha Rabbah, the great Kiddush, because it's not so great in the sense that it's just a bracha. We do treat that bracha similar to how we treat the Friday night, the full Kiddush. Correct. Yes. No, 100%. No, I completely agree with that. Simeon, what was your question? Go ahead. Sorry.
It wasn't a question. I wanted to point something out that you touched on. It's worth noting. When we were originally reading the Shulchan Aruch and we were talking Pina to Pina, the Shulchan Aruch was relatively strict. When we got to the Shulchan Aruch, he seems to loosen up a lot. The differences between the 16th century and the 20th century. The kind of houses that we have.
Right. And what they're doing is extracting to a situation of now cheder lecheder. By the way, even the time of the Chafetz Chaim, I'm not saying that he didn't have multiple rooms, but I even think about my grandmother, right? When she described the house she grew up in Ungvar, right? Which is now it's in Ukraine. It was in Hungary. I think the border's changed like a million times. So she would describe that they had maybe it was a main room, and then there was a room for the for the kids. It didn't sound like some. And then the store was on the store that my great grandfather ran was on the bottom floor, right? And they had a few rooms on there. So I think the concept of rooms was already in existence probably even at the time of the Shulchan Aruch. But when he's basing this law off the time of the Gemara, the way that the houses are described in the Talmud sometimes make me believe that most houses were a single space. That again, there was no dishwasher and the sink and right, 2 dishwashers and 2 sinks, right? It wasn't like we have today, and with the refrigerator. And we have to. Maybe I can do some research on that. I'm sure there are many papers that are written about this, not about even Jewish houses, but what were houses like 2,000 years ago. They didn't have quite the sophistication that we have today, where you have to have multiple spaces and Yeah, it was a different world.
Went to like pilgrim houses. Like
Yeah, how big were they?
they were like one room and then they slept on like a bench or something.
Right, there you go. Okay, so his fourth grade teacher said that the pilgrims,
That's like
the pilgrim
houses
houses,
where they actually were.
and it was one room house. So there you go. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that it's just that applying the halacha from the Gemara, and extracting that, that's why that case of Rav Anan Bar Tachlifa from the roof to the main floor is a very important one to understand the context there. I think that's what's going on. Okay. So let's go to hay. This is a very interesting case. This is a very interesting case of the sukkah. Okay, because a sukkah can be placed in various different spots. It doesn't always have to be in the yard. It doesn't always have to be attached to the house. So we have different situations here. Okay. In Israel, sometimes they have it attached to the house, and the roof is a retractable roof, right? It's in their house. Okay, so. Hey, sifkat on hey. Libayis l'sukkah. Kagon sheyardu geshamim v'kidesh b'bayis. So you can imagine they start the meal and it's raining cats and dogs outside. So they make kiddush inside. V'achar kach, they're all washing their hands, and as everybody's washing their hands, pasku hageshamim. The rain seems to stop. Ve'rotze lechol b'sukkah. And they want to eat in the sukkah. They're like, we want to do a mitzvah. It's the mitzvah to eat in the sukkah. By the way, do you have to? No. Once, Steve, you guys just did Hilchot Sukkah, right? Once you've moved inside for a meal because of the rain, you do not have to then go back out in the sukkah if it stops raining in the middle of the meal. You don't have to. Because why? It's Peshvu, Ke'ein Taduru. If I were to leave my house because there was a flood in my house and I went to eat somewhere else, I don't have to, not sukkah, right? You wouldn't then in the middle of your meal, well, it stopped raining in the middle of my house, so I'm going to go back and take everything back to go to my house. So you treat your sukkah like your house. I left the sukkah for this meal. It's not fitting to eat right at the beginning of the meal, so I don't really have to go back. But if you want to, you can. You can do that, but there actually is no obligation. Once you've left the sukkah, you don't have to go back for the meal if the rain stops. Just be aware of that. So he is describing a situation where you don't have to go back, but you could want to. Okay, this is the more realistic scenario where you start the meal in the sukkah, and you want to eat in the house. Okay. By the way, on the first night of Sukkot, where you have to, even if it could be pouring like it was like 2 years ago. Remember that terrible flood that we had it was Erev Sukkot going into the first night. I think it did stop by the time that the Sukkot began. But boy, if that rain had been coming down during Sukkot, that would have been during the night. Wow, that would have been quite an adventure to go out in the Sukkah. It was really raining that day. And if that had been happening during the meal, during that time, you still would have had to have gone out and made Kiddush in the Sukkah in the pouring rain on the first night because of the Gzeira Shava between the first night of Sukkot, Tesvav, because it starts on the 15th, and Pesach also starts on the 15th. Just like on the 15th, you have an obligation to eat matzah, so too you have an obligation to eat in the Sukkah no matter what.
Like Shave Basuka.
Right.
Wow.
So that's the rabbinic. It's a Gzeira Shava. There are connections between words in the Torah. So you just have to make Kiddush and you make Hamotzi, right? Then the rest of the meal you can go inside. But why do you have to make hamotzi? Because you want to get kiddush b'chom seuda. But let's say it was another night of the as you eat a kazayis nechal and you go inside, and that way I ate a little bit of my meal on the first night, of Sukkot. Let's say it's the different night of Sukkot. It's the second. I don't. It's interesting because. The other night of Kiddush, but I make Kiddush. It's the Shmini Atzeres the next one. Let's say it's the second night of Sukkot, where it's less you have such an issue. Second night of Sukkot, it's raining. I make Kiddush, and then suddenly it starts to rain. We didn't even have a chance to get to the challah. So what happens? I don't want to eat outside. I'm going to go eat in the house. B'chol zeh ein tzarich l'kadesh shenis. You don't need to make a second kiddush. Second night of Sukkot, go ahead and make your hamotzi in the house. Not a problem. But what's the situation here? Umayri, we're dealing with shasukkah besoch habayis. The sukkah is inside the house. Here's what it is. Sukkah is inside the house. It's one of those retractable sukkahs. It's like if it was inside your house, that's not a kosher sukkah. So obviously, it's like, by the way, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law were so in Israel, some of the houses, like you can actually remove one of the rooms in the house. They can remove the roof. You push the button and the roof retracts. So the roof goes away, and now it's open to the sky. So then you can put some schach up there, and it's a good sukkah because the walls can be made out of whatever you want. They can be made out of the steel or whatever. So interesting. I was about to say in the Fifth Avenue Synagogue. Everyone ever been to Fifth Avenue Synagogue? Okay.
Yes.
Ever? No.
Have I?
So have you?
Yes, in the lobby, where they have their kiddushim, it slides back the roof.
Correct. So my brother and sister-in-law were the youth directors there for a couple of years. So they described this to me, Esther and Yehuda. So, and they described that on Sukkot, the lobby is a retractable roof with different, what do you call it? There's just like, not a panel even. There's like, the metal that goes through. It's like holding up the whole structure. Otherwise, it actually can pull back. And on Sukkot, that's where they have Kiddush in the Fifth Avenue Synagogue. They put schach up, and that is where they have Kiddush in the Fifth Avenue Synagogue on Sukkot. It's the sukkah that's inside the building. So if you have a situation where the sukkah is inside, you could have a part of the roof, which is part of the house, which is removable. It doesn't have to be with a button. It could be you just yeah. So, anyways, that's what we're talking about. Shehusar hayitzia. You remove the yitzia. Yitzia, by the way, look up the word for yitzia. That's the yitzia is like, it could be like a balcony, right? You're removing something that's on top, right, of the structure. So that's where we're talking about that. You can go be biased to sukkah. That's where we're talking about. But and ve'ein sham hefsek mechitza acheres rak mechitza sukkah. There's no break between the house and the sukkah. It's just now you're entered into the sukkah area, right? So there's no hefsek. You're going from one spot. You're in one structure basically. Okay. And so we explain here what's the underpinnings of this, right? How is this mipina lapina from corner to corner? Because maybe this should be from room to room, which may be an issue, right? So why is this considered mipina lapina? He says because there's no mechitza, even though the sukkah might be in there, right? So by the way, you might even have the structure of imagine our sukkahs that have the flappy, whatever, inside, under an open space that's in the house. Well, those walls of the sukkah that you built are not l'shem any tashmish. They're not there for any usage. They're simply there for the mitzvah of sukkah, and therefore it's not like it's a different space. It's just like, imagine it. By the way, in this room, right? 1 second here. Imagine if in this room, this part of the space, the roof could come off. But on the rest of the social hall, it couldn't. And imagine I made kiddush over here because I was starting the meal in the sukkah, and now it's starting to and here we built a sukkah, right? I can't put schach all the way over on top of it, but I'll build a sukkah in this spot. The walls of the sukkah in this area are just there l'shem mitzvah. It doesn't make it into a new room. It's just part of the bigger space here, and therefore that's considered mipina lepina. Next time. Okay. Next time we get a house. Okay. So okay, that's considered like corner to corner without any walls in between, right? Not another room. Even if you didn't have it in mind at first. We made kiddush at first. I didn't even realize it was going to rain tonight. We made kiddush. Suddenly the skies open up. One of these pop-up thunderstorms that just passed through. You didn't see it coming, right? Okay, it's fine. I didn't even have to have it in mind because we consider it like corner to corner. Okay? If the sukkah is made outside the house, so it's in a different, not part of the same room, part of the same structure.
Or the same property, but
It's
in
on
a
the same,
backyard.
right? It's on the same property, but it's not in the house. Shemechitos habayis mafsikos. The walls of the house, they end the room that you were in, right? So you make kiddush inside, and now you're going to go outside. The walls of your house are is where it ends. That's like room to room now. If I don't have it in mind from the start, then with that kind of a sukkah, I would need to make another kind of another kiddush if I hadn't eaten anything. I made kiddush, and then we want to go outside to the sukkah area. You got to make kiddush again if you want to do that.
Yes.
Unless you can see it. So, like in my in-laws' house, so like Bubby and Sadie, for that. That's cool. One sec. Okay, we're like in my in-laws' house. They have their kitchen table is right by the sliding door that goes out to the deck.
Oh, yeah.
So their sukkah is right on the other side of the sliding door. So you can go in and out, right? You can see the whole thing. So if you can see the sukkah from the place. But the wall of the house really is ends it. You can't say it's in the same room like my example here, where the sukkah is built inside this room, and part of the room is under the sky, right? That's just the sukkah inside a room here. That's different than you have the sliding door. That's the wall of the house. Okay.
Having the sukkah outside your house.
Yeah, it could be all the way in the yard. Yeah, same thing. Same thing.
Schwartz's brother-in-law.
Same thing. Same thing. It's another room. But the positive is that you can see from one space to the other space, and therefore, as we'll explain later, that helps you. That means that even I can get away with it, right? That look, if I had it in mind, let's say I checked the weather right before Shabbat or right before Sukkot, so I saw it's going to stop raining. Second night of Sukkot, let's say, I need to check the weather ahead of time, or someone told me there's a quick passing storm, so 30 minutes from now it should be over. And so we're all hungry, we're going to eat right now, it's raining right now, so we make kiddush inside. But I have in mind, if it stops raining and it looks like it's just a passing storm, we're gonna go outside. If I have that in mind, I'm good to go. But if I have it in mind that when I sit down to make kiddush in the sukkah, I'm thinking I'm gonna eat in the sukkah the whole time, and suddenly out of nowhere it starts to rain, and I didn't even get to the hamotzi part, so that's not kiddush b'mkom seuda. So I need to make a new kiddush when I get inside. Okay. Because it's a new cheder. What was that? I think so. There are other laws that guide what happens with regards to taking a bracha with you in general. It could be a typical Tuesday. I make a mazonos over here. Does my mazonos follow me? So it's a big question for me, by the way. I have to let you into my world. So my office in the school is in the coach house. So if they're all familiar with a little bit so I am like in Chayrim over there, there's the rest of the school, and then there's like a few grades, and then me. And so the lunchroom, the Cheder Ochel is in the main building. So, sometimes I have to eat and run. So if you have in mind, if you remember, we did this many years ago in this year, we talked about what happens if you have in mind that you want to eat here, but you start your meal in one house and you literally leave. Like you go to a totally new building, right? Or you take that coffee on the run, you start drinking the coffee at home, because usually Shinui Makom is the game breaker, where you have to then make a new bracha. So sometimes, by the way, I've had this right. I started eating one thing in the lunchroom. I get called to go back something in my office. I have a meeting. I really didn't realize I make a new bracha on the thing, on the food, and I take a plate with me, and I make a new bracha when I get to when I get back to my office, because it's a shinui makom that I didn't have in mind. If it's a shinui makom I have in mind, so I take a cup of coffee, and I start in my house, but I know that I'm going to take it to the train, I have to run. You don't need to make another shahakol when you get, to the car, because you had it in mind. I was going to take this to eat it on the run, or even a bagel, by the way, right? I ate them, I'm motzi in my house, but I had in mind I was going to take this to go in the car. If you have in mind, then the shinui makom doesn't require the new bracha. So I would say the same thing here with the bar pagafen. If I didn't have it in mind that I was going to make a new bar, I didn't think I was going to be, going from one spot to the other. I think you have to make a new bar pagafen also. Yeah. Okay. Now, so he continues here. Zehu be'er divrei Ramah. This is the explanation of the words of the Ramah. Lefi mashe be'aro, and I gotta stop in a moment. Hamagid Avram, according to the explanation of the Hamagid Avram, U'ipnei sheyesh poskim hacholkim al zeh, and since there are poskim who argue, who differ with this opinion, K'moshe be'arti be'be'er halacha, as he says in the Be'er halacha, which I do want to read with you. We'll have to do that next time. There are others who say that they're not comfortable with this. Al kein tov k'sherotze lakor achar kiddush es diraso la seuda sheyishtem itchila revius yaim b'makom hahu. He says, let's get away with it. So if I have to make kiddush and I'm going to have to move, it's starting to rain. But I don't feel comfortable that I'm going to have to do. I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to move, and I want kiddush b'makom seuda. So maybe I don't have enough wine to make another kiddush, back inside or something like that. So he says, just make sure to drink a revius of wine in the place where you made the kiddush. And this, Simi, goes back to something you said earlier. What is the Suda? So you know how you can get away with it? If it's something that you can make bracha achas mein shalosh on, meaning like al micha or al gefen v'al pri gefen, you can get away with that as being considered Suda. And so if you drink a revius of wine that requires that bracha acharona, so technically you can escape, you can wiggle out of this one by saying, I drank enough. Now that doesn't help all the other people who are around the table unless they also drink. So it helps you to have kiddush b'mkom seuda. But if the other people didn't have a seuda, they didn't have oneg in that spot, then it's game over for them. They have to figure out something when they get inside. As we'll say later on. Sorry, right? The revius yayin gets you to the definition of seuda, and then you're good, and you don't need to make another kiddush according to everybody. Now, again, it doesn't help everybody else, so that's something that may not solve the whole problem in your, By the way, the other place for sukkah, by the way, I didn't think about it, was Cholamoid Sukkahs. Shabbos Cholamoid Sukkahs, yeah. That's the other place when you're making kiddush with the sukkah relevant. Okay, we'll stop here. We're going to read the Be'er Halacha next time about this, and maybe we'll add some, if the Aruch HaShulchan, maybe a few things about the sukkah. But, okay, so this is at least a start here to, and we'll explore the other opinions. We'll explore the other opinions about Kiddush b'makom seuda, the one that we follow ultimately, which helps explain our minhag. The Mishnah Berurah, by the way, at the end hedges and doesn't actually like what we do, but we're standing on good ground. Don't worry. But the end, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't like it so much. So we'll see that next time. All right. No, he doesn't. Yeah, he did.
Rav, welcome back. I missed you.
Thank you, Simeon. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You take care.